Yes, everyone, you know what time it is. It's your boy Jack and Dave here, and we're joined by Sonny from Sonny Talk Spurs. We've decided to lock him in our elevator of a podcast and have a good chat about Spurs. The Ange ball is sooner returning than it is away from us. That's what we spoke about yesterday. The Ange ball withdrawals are not going to be as strong as they used to be, Sonny. Thanks for joining us, and yeah, looking forward to this one.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'll be honest, I'm sick of the international break. I've currently got the England game in the corner of the room, and I don't think I'm going to be looking at it that much because I'm just over it. Bring back Ange ball. We need some proper football. Gareth Southgate, you're not the one.
Dave is also suffering with his own version of Kenny ball.
Do you know what? It's actually very similar to Southgate ball, if you want me to be brutally honest. Look, I just find it boring, and that's even more so since Ange ball has took place. And I'm like yourself, and so I'm like every other Spurs fan out there. We just want the Ange ball to roll back again, and the Premier League to get back in action. Look, you're international football. We spoke about this. It's not what it was when I was growing up. The same lure, the same sort of adulation, and that it's not there.
And everybody, before we get into what we are going to be talking about today, which is sort of a golden nugget, a golden opportunity, which is Ange was speaking to Talk Sport. He was speaking to Jim White and Simon Jordan. I think it's just something that we get to really get stuck into. But before we do that, please hit that like button and also follow over to Sonny Talk Spurs, please. He's just started up his own channel. Definitely deserves some love from the Harris Army and from the Flat Cap Army. Let's send some people over, get him, kind of incorporated and intermixed with this community of ours. But let's start first with one of the questions that Simon Jordan asked Ange, and he said, Tottenham as a challenge. What is it that drew you to them in the first place? To which Ange answered, exactly that, Simon. I love a challenge. The question I sort of get from that, Sonny, is do you think that might be why Ange probably got the job in the first place ahead of so many others, right? Maybe he's actually more interested in the challenge than like a Nagelsmann could have been or someone like that.
That's the thing. I think going into the summer, Tottenham was a bit of a hard sell. I feel like, we somehow did sell it to Mourinho. We did somehow eventually sell it to Conte. Obviously, we got Nuno in and all that. But, when you look at Andy's career, he's obviously late 50s and his whole Tottenham career his whole footballing career has gone like up and up. He started in Australia, managed the national team, went to Japan, went to Celtic, and now he's here. So that's the thing. I feel like with the last couple of managers I mentioned there as well, it felt like they were doing us a favour. And they mentioned this on TalkSport today. Like, we were paying these managers like £50 million per year, and it felt like they were doing us a favour. But Ange feels like he's part of it. He speaks so well, which he showed today. He's like a statesman in his responses. He cares. He will be firm but fair. And I think that's a good way to be a manager. Like, you can't just go and berate players in public like Conte would or Mourinho. You sometimes have to put your arm around. And we've seen that with certain players this season, like your Basumas and players like and Romero. I'd say the players who are on the edge of like, could they be the next level? And hopefully with Ange, they will be. So I feel like I am so confident under Ange. I don't know where we'll end up. I'm not like, those predictions probably can wait till later in the video. But at the moment, it is going quite swimmingly. And he just seems like a great bloke, doesn't he? And he says mate all the time. So I'm quite, I say mate all the time. So it sort of like relates to my dialect.
Do you think he, just quickly, a little side tangent question, do you think he came across well to Simon Jordan even in that sort of answer and because Simon Jordan usually cooks up some pretty good questions. He wants you to say something or he wants you to go down a certain path. Do you think Ange, did a good job in representing himself?
I think he did fantastic. It's not easy to go on the White and Jordan show. I should know. I watch it or listen to it most days. But, I think his responses were perfect. And the thing is, they both really like him. Like a lot of people, that there was a lot of even like gooners messaging in going like, I can't sit here and say that I don't like Ange. He comes across fantastically. And it's like, oh my God, what have we got here? We've got actually like, are we becoming likable due to this guy? And, but yeah, I feel like, perfect answers. There was nothing where I was like, even these like certain answers about the Carabao Cup exit, I was like, yeah, I understand. Like you're new to the job at the end of the day and you are experimenting. So I will let you off for the time being.
Yeah, Dave, Simon sort of like, he's in a way buttered up the question with, a bunch of context about Levy and, how sort of so many managers do see, Spurs as a challenge. There's all these sort of external factors as well as internal factors that make it quite a difficult job. And he says, given all of that, isn't it a challenge? Why would you want the job in the first place? And then he said, listen, Simon, that is why I want the job, because it is a challenge. What did you make of that answer?
Look, first of all, I think it's refreshing, right? To hear him, to have someone, Jack, that actually wants to accept a challenge and that embraces a challenge. Whereas with Jose Mourinho and Conte, that wasn't there. You bring them in, you have to start providing them with players that are ready to go. They ain't out on the training pitch, out there, trying to improve these guys. If they're not good enough, he's out, the next guy's in. That's the way they operate.
Yeah.
But as Daniel Levy and as a club, we don't operate that way either. Plus, they would have wanted more experienced players compared to someone like Ange Postecoglou, who needs younger, hungrier, more athletic players that can get around. So I think the reason why Ange Postecoglou, got it as well, Jack, is some of the other managers involved, right? You got Nagelsmann. I think he wanted to say over the DOF, which would have changed the complete direction of what we were already building off what we were doing when Paratici was here. I don't think the club wanted to go in that different direction. So that put him off the list. And there were a few others there as well. But when you look at it, we have to understand Tottenham Hotspur will always be a challenge. We're not a lower half Premier League team. We're a top 6 team. But we don't have the wealth or the income as some of the other top 6 teams. So in that regard, it's always going to be a challenge because you're trying to compete with them. You're trying to overcome them and win a league without having the same net spend as them or the same player pool available to you due to the finances they have. So that's what makes Tottenham an absolute massive challenge. But Ange Postecoglou, I think, is the perfect hybrid between that. And what I mean by that is, under Pochettino, we love the football, but I think his inexperience came to cost us in cup finals and semi-finals and stuff like that. I think he got overawed by the occasion. Whereas with Jose Mourinho and Conte, they weren't the same charismatic or people person that Pochettino was. Whereas I think what you've got now is you've got someone like Postecoglou who's just as stubborn and won't compromise on his style of play, etc., like a Jose and a Conte, but you've got the likable factor of a Pochettino with the same style of football. So I think you've got the perfect mesh. And I think when he went to interview for the job, he went in, I think, compared to others, he didn't need as much as a high turnover of players as maybe what other managers put forward. I think the brand of football helped them. And I think the fact that he's willing to embrace the challenge definitely is what got him the job at the end of the day, Jack, because most other managers, they'd be like, okay, yeah, we get it's a challenge, but I want a DOF. I'm going to want this amount of transfer funds to be available. I need a guarantee on this player, this player, this player, this player, where Ange doesn't work like that. And plus, Ange's knowledge of other markets where you don't have to spend a fortune, like what he done at Celtic, it's an added bonus. And I think when you look at it, everything Ange is about and the way he operates and stuff like that suits Daniel Levy because you don't have to make a complete change of the whole football club to suit the manager. On this occasion with Ange Postecoglou, the manager's coming in to adapt and help suit the football club.
For me, where this question even came from in the first place is when I kind of think about the negotiations that we had with managers, it often did feel like sort of they're often like just asking and asking and asking and asking and like demanding all these sort of things for them to even consider Tottenham Hotspur in sort of the first place. They needed all these sort of, like, what is it? These sort of like demands, before they even get the job in the first place, not even like until they're, 6 months into the job. It was just all these sort of prerequisites or whatever. I'm not sure what the right word is, but it did feel like with Ange, that wasn't the case. He wasn't demanding, 150 million transfer budget. He wasn't demanding that this player has to stay, all these sort of kind of different things that seemed to be the case with Nagelsmann. It felt like with Nagelsmann, he wanted his own sort of transfer budget, his own director of football, wanted his own skateboarding rink. Felt like the case with Tuchel, he needed everything kind of in a similar way. We know that Tuchel sort of has, maybe to a degree, earned that right to sort of demand so much, but he's also kind of in that sort of bracket and in that type of category. Arne Slot, to a degree, kind of used us, but he also seemed to kind of still similarly fall into some sort of bracket of like he needed some real sort of guarantee of, a revamp or, that he had control because he would then be leaving what was, his project over at Feyenoord. And it felt like, right, Ange Postecoglou was the only person that was going to coming into the job saying, yeah, I'll take Spurs how you are right now. I don't need you guys to change very much. I'll take it as it is. And perhaps that's what sort of made the job easier for, Daniel Levy and picking the manager, because he was probably the only guy that really showed any true interest and love for the job and for the challenge. But also maybe that's what distinguished him for the rest of the candidates. All the rest of the candidates went in with that different attitude of like, I want Levy to impress me, where like Ange was kind of going into it to impress Levy and to impress Spurs in general. That's probably what got him the job, I think.
I also pose a question to Sonny and yourself, Jacko, as well, is do we think that Ange is one of the only managers that sort of had a plan without Harry Kane? Because when you look at likes of a Tuchel, right, he ended up buying Harry Kane. You look at likes of Nagelsmann, he does need that guy up front. And I think with Ange Postecoglou, he said, okay, you don't necessarily have to go out and get me a striker. I can make it work. I have goals coming from all sort of out throughout the team. I can make this work. Because I do think most managers would have walked into that interview and said, okay, what's Harry Kane's situation? And the club would have known well by then what the Harry Kane situation was. They would have spoke to him. Would have been in contact with his camp. They would have had a general feeling whether he was going to sign on the dotted line, because you'd like to think the club were offering him contracts last season behind the scenes to try and get him to sign, and it hadn't worked. So they would have known by then what Harry Kane's situation was during the interview process. So do we think that maybe Ange as well accepted the challenge in as far as, I thought you don't have to go out and spend that 100 million on another striker, to come in here and just to suit my system for us to get goals to win games?
I'd say, I mean, for example, he wanted Brennan Johnson as one of his high priority targets. But I think because of the Brentford links with Brennan Johnson, that was like a bit of a tussle there. That's why the deal happened so late. With Kane, though, I'd say, yeah, I think we did sort of know it was going to come to a head. And you think as well, I've heard many people suggest, and I know this does sound a bit balmy, but people were saying that maybe does Harry Kane even suit an Ange Postecoglou system? And everyone was like, whoa, this is a guy who scored 30 goals in Antonio Conte's 10 at the back system. Like, this guy is one of the best strikers in world football next to Erling Haaland currently. But then I guess what you think of when you think of a Ange Postecoglou main man, number 9, is a guy who is willing to like run and press defenses and maybe sacrifice goals for the betterment of the team, which, don't get me wrong, Kane has done that in the sense of assists. But, I see a lot of an Ange goal to me seems like winger takes it to byline, puts it into the middle, the striker's made a run, and then Sarr or Maddison are on the edge to mop up in the second and third balls. And we never really did that as, I don't see us as like winning those second and third balls in the last like 4 or 5 seasons. So it's good to see that. Would Kane really, especially with even watching England against Ukraine, Kane's still dropping deep in these games. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, you need to sort of get into the box. And obviously it's a bit different for Bayern. I've seen a couple of bits of him where he seems to be more in and around the box. But that's not me discounting anything about Harry Kane's style. But going with the Ange sort of way of it, you've got to prepare for all different outcomes, as a manager, especially when you're coming to a new job in the summer. He would have probably thought of different alternatives. For example, he's put Son through the middle already, and we're only 4 games in. He's tried Solomon on the left. He's tried Kulusevski in the front 3, So he is up for experimenting. And in a Kane system, in a Ange system, you've got to be a versatile player. And I'd say we've got a nice bunch there who can play probably as up and down the pitch in the 8s, in the 6s, wherever really. So I'm not too worried. And we're scoring goals. If we'd gone 4 games and there was 2-3 goals, then I would be concerned. But at the moment, the goals are spreading around. And that's why we're not really talking about Richarlison's situation. So it's, it's okay.
It's a good question, Dave, because while we're also saying, right, that he might have gotten the job because he just embraces the challenge maybe more than the other managers did, but also because he did perhaps have a Harry Kane plan that seemed more convincing. All the other managers might have even said to Levy, listen, if Harry Kane goes, then I go. Like, I don't want this job in the first place. And Ange might have been one of the only managers brave enough to say, I mean, I can find a way without him. Sure, I would love to have him maybe, but I'll find a way if it does end up going that sort of direction. And that could be another reason for how he got this job in the first place, for sure. And I think that's a good question. I kind of also had another sort of comment, that I wanted to address that he made. He said, I'm not going to compromise on certain things, and I'm going to take the responsibility for whatever happens here, good, bad, or otherwise. If I don't succeed, it's not going to be because of something that exists within this club or external factors. And whatever challenges come within this football club, I'll accept that and I'll take responsibility for that. For you, Sonny, is Ange maybe making a dig at previous managers?
I mean, I like his ownership of issues. Like, he took ownership over the Carabao Cup exit. He took ownership over the West Ham defeat in pre-season. And that's what you want. You want your manager to sometimes just be like, right, I set the team up. It stops at my door, sort of thing. And maybe it is a dig at Conte. Conte's last moment was literally slagging the whole team off after
Infamous
don't get me wrong.
breakdowns.
Don't get me wrong. Like, I sit there and I can berate the players till the cows come home. But at the end of the day, the manager is the guy, setting it all up, and it's his final decision about subs and stuff like that. And even after the Fulham result, I did think, okay, and you could have fielded a stronger team. But then that team that was fielded should, and I'm not discrediting Fulham at all, they're a good Premier League side, but they should really be beaten. And it came down to penalties, and the player who missed the penalty is no longer at the club, thank God. But, I feel like Ange has answered that perfectly. Like, if he wants to get the fan base on side, then have a cheeky dig at the previous managers. I do not mind that at all.
Dave, is he making a slight dig at a Antonio Conte breakdown or Jose's famous little blow-ups? Is he making a slight dig?
No, I don't think he is, Jack. I think rather than blaming the club or the players like other managers have done, which I'd argue, they haven't said too much wrong that many Spurs fans haven't said about the club. For me, I think he's just taking ownership of everything because that's the sort of guy he is. But also, right, he ain't going to throw the players under the bus. He's not that sort of manager because he tries to build everyone sort of together, a camaraderie between everybody. So he ain't going to be throwing players under the bus like that publicly. But also, let's be honest, he's pandering up to Daniel Levy as well by saying, I'll take responsibility, because what he does then is he puts himself in the good books. And then if you remember what Paul Barber said on TalkSport about Pochettino, right? After the first season, when Pochettino earned that trust of Daniel Levy, he sort of got the keys to the kingdom. And I reckon that's exactly what Ange Postecoglou is trying to do here with comments like that, because let's be honest, right? He comes out, calls the club out for the transfer policy, even if he is happy that we didn't sign another, or unhappy that we didn't sign another centre back. What's the benefit of him coming out there now and saying it when the window is closed and the club can't act? Because all you're doing is fracturing that relationship between you and Daniel Levy. But also, it's sending out a message to maybe some of the other players that you don't rate them, that you don't think they can step in. So when your time is to sort of rely and call upon them, if you've come out and spoke about them in a press in a certain manner, expect them to let you down. It's the nature of the game. It's the way it is. It's the nature of the beast. But look, for me on this one, Jack, I think he's just playing it smart. I think he's, he's one of them. He'll take full responsibility. I think he's looking at the long term. I think he gets through this season. I think next summer he'll get exactly what he wants, by acting like this. I think he's playing lip service to Daniel Levy to get the goods.
Yeah, do you agree with that, Sonny? Is he playing lip service to Daniel Levy, trying to make him look good?
I mean, it's hard to tell really. But even like off the back of that, it sort of made me think, like it was quite a bold decision for us to sell Davinson Sanchez, in the sense of it was a big decision to then go, okay, so the Eric Dyer stuff is up in the air anyway. But basically, the next centre back is Ashley Phillips, who's 18, and we've just signed him. So if anything, that's putting a lot of Ange is basically saying, like, this is my decision. Trust me on this. I only need this guy. And I actually respect that. I think that's quite good. A lot of players, a lot of managers could have gone like, well, but we needed another centre-back. We needed Tapsoba or whoever we were linked to. But he sort of done this decision and gone, actually, let's get rid of Davinson Sanchez. Because that's what makes me laugh about some fans. Some fans would go, oh, I don't know why we got rid of Davinson Sanchez, but they're the same players slagging him off every week when he makes a mistake. It just doesn't add up. And then they'll be like, oh, but is Ashley Phillips ready? It's like, we won't know until we see. Like, proof will be in the pudding. But at the end of the day, he's new around town, and Daniel Levy is a hard, he's, I've heard Harry Redknapp, I've heard Martin Yole, all the former managers basically say, like, it's a, it's a struggle. It is a struggle. And, but at the end of the day, we were the third highest spenders this transfer window. So you can't say, we were back, but then again, we did sell a prize asset. So, don't get me wrong, I'm not a Levy inner. And
Mm.
I'm more edging towards Levy out, but I can respect some of the things, the stadium and the training ground and all that stuff. But some of his negatives outweigh the positives. But you got to keep him on side. But then it's also, I don't think Andrew will mess about in these situations. I think he will go to Levy and be like, I need this. I need more of it, like in January or something like that. Because, stereotypically, we never do stuff in January. But I could sit here now and go, probably another midfielder, probably another defender, especially with AFCON coming up, which I'm very worried about because I feel like that's when our season will fall off a cliff.
Yeah. Ange to me doesn't come across as the guy that's going to deliberately sort of want to throw Jose or Conte under the bus to make himself look great or something like that. But at the same time, I do feel like he is sort of saying I'm not going to have some sort of unexpected press conference where I'm just going to completely unleash, on the players or completely unleash on the club. I'm not going to just pull some random sort of, action that, they wouldn't expect. And that's where maybe he's just trying to say is that if things go wrong and if things end up sort of making my job a lot harder, I'm not going to use, those post-match press conferences or interviews as a way to, turn it into a soap opera about how hard it is at Spurs, and how much the mentality needs to change and all the things that we've always agreed with when the managers have mentioned it. But it did often feel like, is this turning into a bit of a soap opera here, for, the manager just to air his grievances about what, they're going through and just kind of saying, I'm not going to do that. I'm actually going to embrace, even if the challenges are outside of my control, or even if the challenges make my job harder, that's, completely okay with me. And I actually think that's sometimes a bit more of a perspective that's pretty good, to have with life is sometimes right. Your job or something might be made a bit harder on you and there will be challenges that come the way. It doesn't mean that every single time you need to sort of complain and air the grievances to somebody. Maybe you do just sort of have to buckle down, and just find a way to sort of navigate through whatever challenges or walls get put up in front of you. And, another thing that I just quickly want to throw a little tangent into. I do appreciate how much Ange also speaks like a normal person compared to also other managers. There is that thing where I loved Conte's riddles. I loved his metaphors and his random puzzles of, press conferences. Dave and I, when we would try to make sense of them, would feel like we were just sort of, jigsawing all these, quotes together to make any sense of what he was trying to say. Because he knew that he was trying to say something, but he would just riddle it together in so many different, sort of different meanings. And Jose just had all these other, type of weird, sort of comments that you had to sort of look at the other way instead of what he really meant. And it feels like with Pochettino, it was just a bit boring at times and also just would sort of, occasionally just cover what he really meant. And it's finally nice just to have a guy just who speaks like a normal person and actually doesn't, end up being misconstrued or misunderstood, sort of thing. It's just nice, and we also don't expect him probably to have a blow up at any stage either.
It's the way Ange conducts his business, though, like with Jose Mourinho and Conte, right? They're master manipulators of the press, and they're able to use that to maybe have a pop-up players trying to get them to react in a certain way of performances, being able to say, look, I need this, and be able to force the board to go and act for them at various clubs. I've seen them do this. Master manipulators of the press. With Ange Postecoglou is completely different. He keeps everything in-house. You will not see this man while he's here come out and say one bad thing about the board or one bad thing about players. He's had the chance with Eric Dyer a number of times. Journalists have asked him questions and he's refused to go to that level to, even why he's not in the squad. And this is what is great about Ange Postecoglou. But the reason why he does this is because he wants everybody on side. He wants the squad. He wants the canteen ladies. He wants Daniel Levy. He wants everybody, the fans, all on one page pushing together. And in order for that to happen, and this is what it's a risky sort of, what would you say, a game plan by Postecoglou, is because he banks on going into a club, getting momentum nice and early. And with that momentum, people that were maybe wanting to stray other ways, very, very quickly they feel left out and they want to get on board with it. And he's so used to that happening. So that's why, especially over the early stages, you will not see this guy criticize one player or criticize the board in the press. Nowhere near it, because it would go against everything his philosophy and everything he needs to do behind the scenes to be able to pull the club up to where he wants them to go in order in that direction. So you just won't see it. I'm telling you now, you won't.
In the past too, Sonny, it felt like we always sort of as fans had these sort of discussions like we do right now. And usually the topic ended up always being, for a large portion, the relationship between the manager and sort of the ownership, the tension between Levy and whoever he had in charge at the time. Do you feel like we're not going to have as much of those conversations really anymore now with Ange in charge? It's not going to be as much of the usual thing that Spurs fans talk about every week, the relationship between Levy and his managers.
Well, this is the thing. We've got I'm not sure what the actual date is, but there's a Tottenham Hotspur, I actually can't remember what it's called, but there's a talk going on where it's going to be Levy
Yeah.
and Son. And I think
Oh,
the last one to happen of that was, I think, when Pochettino was at the club. So that really sums it up. Like, it's like we are in a place where that can be a comfortable conversation more than just treading on eggshells, I could imagine. And, that's why I was happy with Son becoming the captain as well, because it seems like, and you see all these tweets and reports that like the vibe is back and everyone's happy and it's all good. That's what felt weird about this international break, that there hasn't actually been many negatives to talk about around the club. And I even was planning my videos this week, thinking like, I've been so positive the last 5. I've got to find just one negative thing to talk about, just because there is, at the end of the day, we're Tottenham fans. Like, we've always got to be a little half glass empty. But yeah, with that, I think it's perfect for it's just we need that sort of a bit of an uplift. We need, there's a lot of people, like I for one was questioning Ange as an appointment in the first place, because I'm like, Scottish League, it's a big jump, and all these other managers we were linked to. But then, he came in, and as soon as I watched that West Ham game, even though we lost, I was like, this is some of the best attacking football I've seen in donkey's years.
Yeah.
So I just think that that's what we needed to get first. We needed to get everyone back on side. I don't think it's fully there, because we've had the ticket issue at the football club, and I think if you said to most fans tomorrow, Levy's selling up, do you agree with that? I think a lot of people would be happy with him to sell up the club. But there's still a long way to go, and there's still many bridges to cross, and it's so early doors. And I actually think a lot of what's happened on the pitch with the likes of Newcastle and Villas and all those Chelseas, they haven't really got going yet. So when push comes to shove, which I think will be in the next couple of weeks with Arsenal and Liverpool back to back, that's when we'll see how the fan base reacts then, because it could all go hit the fan again. We don't know.
What do you think, Dave? Gone are the thumbnails of Daniel Levy with a manager looking very angry, right next to him, and the verses in between and those sort of things. Is that going to be, a thing of the past?
Look, I think if we can get past October, November time, because if you actually historically look back at that period, we sacked Pochettino in around that time. We sacked Nuno in and around that time. Under Jose Mourinho, it's where the wheels fell off. We were top of the league. The wheels completely fell off. Underneath Antonio Conte, we got off to our best start of the season ever. After the October international break and we came back, we absolutely fell off a cliff. So October, November time is historically over the last 3 to 4 years a tough time for Tottenham. And the reason why that is because we've had manager bounces, but we haven't been able to sustain it for a long period of time. And that's why we've had such a high turnover of managers. With Ange Postecoglou, I'm hoping it will last longer than that, because he's ripped out players that were maybe doing everything they can to hang on to their, positions at Tottenham, rather than what was best for the club. And what I mean by that is, for instance, you got the likes of Eric Dyer, right? We've seen with the guy. He can have 6 good months, but he cannot maintain it for a whole season. And when that drop-off happens, a lot of other people around suffer. He ends up getting dropped, along with a few others, and they've always been the same sort of faces. All of a sudden, you start seeing things in the press. Players unhappy with training, players unhappy with this, players unhappy with that. And it doesn't take a genius to work out the manager's gone not so long after. Whereas with Ange Postecoglou, I think he's realised that, and he's ripped them out. He says, no, you're not a part of my squad. The likes of Sanchez is gone. The likes of Dyer is gone. Well, not gone, but he's nowhere near the squad. Same as Hugo Lloris. People like that. And I think that's been his biggest, the biggest thing he could have done, because the old leadership group we had, the reason why things went so stale is because, A, we didn't do enough recruitment, or the recruitment we did do under Steve Hitchen was absolutely so bad. but B, because they were there for so long, 8, 9, 10 years in some cases. And ultimately that ends up becoming stale, especially with football. It's a very fast moving game. And when them players were always next under the door, because we were same under Jose, okay, get this season over and done with, get a centre back. All of a sudden, Jose gets sacked, Dyer stays. Same with Antonio Conte. We need a centre back. No, you're going to use Dyer. All of a sudden, manager sacked, Dyer stays, but yet the same problems under the same managers are still a problem. So getting them gone, I'm hoping will buy Ange that time to last the season and then re-go again next season. Because what we haven't had we haven't had a manager in the dugout for a full season since we sacked Pochettino, because we've had rotations nearly every single season since. So it's very, very important that we keep a guy in the dugout for a full season and let him build something, because we're looking for instant success, but not giving the managers the necessary tools to do it. Whereas now, I think Postecoglou, he's a great manager, and he's a very good manager, Jack. I told you about him when I was watching him at Celtic for the 2 years. But, with Postecoglou, he not only is a good manager, Jack, but he also brings the style of play, and he doesn't need massive amounts of money, and he can get people to play his style. So for me, with Postecoglou, I think we've got an absolute manager here for sure.
Definitely. Jim White bravely asked Ange about whether he had any regrets over the lineup he chose against Fulham, which saw us knocked out of another chance to win a trophy. Ange answered, "I'm not in this job to win something, desperate to win something. I want to create a club that has the opportunity to win things on a yearly basis, and there's a difference." What are your thoughts on his answer there, and maybe the distinction that he was trying to make? Do you agree with that distinction he's trying to make, Sonny?
I think that's just like going off the points that you're making there. Like it's as cringe as it sounds, and Arsenal fans loved it. Trust the process, and that's what it is. It's about not just winning a cup straight away, and like we've seen it with Manchester United. They won the Carabao Cup last year through having a very generous home draw, if I don't mind saying so. And in the final, Newcastle didn't have their number one keeper, so it all sort of like laid out perfectly, but. We go into season 2 and there's question marks now over Erik ten Hag and his handling of one, situations at the football club, and 2, the squad and how they set up in their midfield and all that jargon. And don't get me wrong, on paper, going out in the second round because we're not in Europe to Fulham, it all looks bad, and everyone jumps on the back of the bandwagon of it's Tottenham, Spursy and all that. But it is that process of, maybe we haven't earned the right to try and compete yet at that level. Obviously we've had a great start in the Premier League, but it is going to be a process. And I agree with what Dave was saying. Like, we need to really give Ange a season. Like, if it gets to Christmas and it does get a bit shaky, we've got to hold our nerve. There's no point, because I don't see where we actually do go from here if we do sack Ange. Like, because we've done the Conte Mourinho route. We're now going back to this process. And, we gave Pochettino time. We did give him time, and, we're on the cusp of something amazing. But then again, those issues were then on Levy's doorstep, not spending for a calendar year and backing the manager. So that's what we need. We need that relationship between, it's like what we sort of were referring to earlier, like Levy and Ange have got to really get on well. He's got to get players in that he needs. That squad and team is nowhere near the finished article. Like, one of my negatives and worries for this season is the squad is thin. We get 1 or 2 injuries in certain positions. I'm thinking Madison, I'm thinking Bassoum, I'm thinking one of the centre backs. That's basically like we're like near the crisis period there. And same with AFCON. When Sarr and Bassoum go to Senegal and Mali respectively, like, that's going to be like a gaping chasm, and we're back to using the likes of Højbjerg and Skip, who I rate, but I don't think they work together in the midfield. So it is this, like, we're at like the beginning of the book, chapter 1, page 1. We are not the finished article in this saga. Like, it is. I'd like to see him given a proper go. Like, that's why I think a lot of Tottenham fans this year should have been a bit like underestimating the team, thinking like, I'll be chuffed with 6th. And
that's what we started
and like chuffed with 6th, and if we're playing differently. But the problem is Tottenham fans are all the same. We see us playing this football already. We're sitting second, undefeated, and we're like, oh my God, could we actually get top 4?
I made Dave change his season prediction. I was like, "Do you want to change your season prediction?" Which is a crazy thing to ask.
I moved up to fifth. I moved mine up to fifth because I was like, we're looking a bit better than some of the teams, but I didn't want to like go fully straight in because of I don't know.
Let me ask you though, Sonny. We speak about Ange Postecoglou needing time, all right? Let's be honest. Pochettino got time to build what he did. Martin Yole, Harry Redknapp, when they were given time to build stuff, they put us on the right path. You look around the Premier League, Guardiola, he's had money, but he's also had time to develop what he's done at City. Same as Klopp at Liverpool and stuff like that, And I think everyone sort of expects instant success, but it only works if you have a bankroll model. What's it called? Moneyball, Jack, I believe. A Moneyball sort of system, right? Where it's just next player out, next player in. And, because Chelsea done that for years and got success, all of a sudden now everyone goes, oh, we don't have time in football. But when you take a step back and actually look at situations, especially now, look what Arteta's done with Arsenal, and that kills me to say that. That's but true. You give teams time, you will get to where you need to go. But will the fans give Postecoglou time? Because this has been one of my biggest gripes and my biggest arguments. I said it way back in the summer when this guy was appointed. I was like, look, we are going to have rocky periods during the season. We have to give him time. And a lot of the fan base like, yeah, no problem, we'll give him time. I was a bit dubious. I said, I don't think so. I think as soon as things go wrong, we'll call for his head because he doesn't have the same reputation as a Jose or as a Conte. And as soon as we lost against Fulham, rather than look at some of the similar players that have let us down in cup games before this, that, and the other, everyone went straight for Ange's head.
Yeah, there are more questions of Ange.
So will he be able to see through a rocky period? Will the fans have the patience?
I think I can imagine he could steady a ship. Like, we're talking about here, like the way he comes across, the way he speaks. I think he is good enough for that. And I just think that it's what I was saying with that the Sanchez example. Like, Tottenham fans have sometimes got to realise, it did not work under Mourinho. It did not work under Conte. Like, I don't see the point of like keep looking back and thinking what could have been, like we're in where we are now. That and I feel like this is the perfect guy to help us. And I just think you have got to be patient, because I don't get me wrong, like there was moments last season where the toxicity of that stadium, I don't know if you guys ventured over there last year, but like I went to Arsenal at home, I went to West Ham, and it was just, you could feel the energy was just poisonous, is how I'd go that far. Whereas against Man United, don't get me wrong, like that first half was a bit heart and mouth situation, but I've never since we moved, I think probably since the Crystal Palace opening game, that's probably the best atmosphere that stadium's seen. Like, it was ringing, it was giving me goosebumps, it was like electric. So I feel like I feel like the fans they've got to give him time. There's no point knee jerking, but there's because I feel like this is also, I keep relating to other situations in football, but Chelsea are going to go through the exact same situation, but they're like on a different planet because they are so used to winning trophies. It's like, win a trophy, finish 10th, win the Champions League. It's like, okay, but that's what they're used to. Whereas they're making a risk because they're signing these players up to 8-year contracts, and it could all backfire. Like, we don't know how these players are going to turn out. But what I like from Tottenham this year is we are going down this route of like stat-based signings, which I've really enjoyed, because what we have is we've looked at Brentford and we've looked at Brighton and gone, let's basically copy what you're doing. But because we're Tottenham and we have got this big six mentality, we could beat you. Like we saw with Brennan Johnson, we actually beat Brentford to that signing because of,
more pull, more money.
Exactly. And like I'd say, apart from James Maddison, every signing we made was a sort of stat-based signing, like Mickey van der Ven, Alejo Valise, Ashley Phillips. We got the new guy from Split. Like, these are all like signings where Tottenham wouldn't do that back at like under Conte. We were calling for the likes of like Bastoni and and I don't know if we actually got enough about us to get a Bastoni out of Inter Milan compared to other teams. And that's not me disrespecting Tottenham. That's just, I feel like that's quite obvious. But I just feel like we have to sort of pivot, because going back to the fan base in general, like, I love Tottenham fans. I think we're great on social media. But I think what's happened is, because we've gone from like, obviously I'm only like 26, so I don't remember like and I started my first Tottenham memories were Lasagna Gate. So,
Yeah.
I started off on the poor foot, but like, I don't remember, like, my dad was a season ticket during the Sugar era, and he was like, it was bad. And then we've obviously come on leaps and bounds, and, we've done well. I can't, like, we've got into Champions League. We've, competed for trophies. We know we've been in title races, and we've got to a Champions League final, which is all well and good. But because we've had a taste of that, it's like we should be getting that. And at the end of the day, in football, you don't have divine right. It's like United fans. You don't have a divine right because you were good 20 years ago. You just don't.
Yeah.
You have to earn it. And don't get me wrong, by earning it nowadays, you have got to spend a bit of money. But, I feel like with Tottenham fans, it is sometimes like you have to pick and choose your battles and about where we are. And I feel like you've got this season, we've got to be patient. I can't stress that enough. I feel like, and what I'm seeing at the moment is, I'd say from a lot of, 70% of the fan base are like, are happy, are contented with where we're going. But there will be a minority who, after the cup, they're like, what? They lose their head. They go like, oh, this and that and the other. But I don't know.
Yeah.
It's football. It's tribal. We're going to have, not everyone's going to agree, and it is what it is. And probably by this spiel, I probably annoyed some people.
2 points that you and Dave both made, though, that I thought kind of will be interesting for kind of future down the road, to think about, is Dave has brought up, right? October, November period has always been a bit tricky for Spurs, where things seem to go awry. And you mentioned, Sonny, that this sort of team is one injury, two injuries away from all of a sudden, us being from cloud nine, back to maybe a bit more of a reality of like, okay, now we're not as strong as we normally look on paper all of a sudden. And those two things, I think, could easily happen, where Spurs go through some period where maybe some injury picks up and Ange doesn't have the same strong 11 that he can pick, and he's going to have to sort of lean on players that are less talented, maybe not as reliable. And there will be games where we won't look as convincing. We won't look as, as perfectly flowing as we do right now. And will sort of the blame be then put on Ange instead of sort of us, giving him that benefit of the doubt, giving him that time, all those sort of things that you mentioned there, because previously that hasn't been given to managers, whether it was right or wrong to give them that time or not. It just felt like, there was those crucial moments where all of a sudden, things maybe didn't go their way with an injury, a decision, or fixture congestion, whatever it could have been, or maybe even directors of football getting thrown into jail, or in Conte's case, constantly, kind of battling between, I think he had his own health issues, of course, a lot of losses in his family and, friends, it's just, you kind of think about it, when managers have gone through tough periods, we haven't exactly shown them a lot of faith or confidence, to get through it. And we sort of did end up showing them the door, maybe for good reasons or bad reasons, but it is going to be something that Ange could sort of go through. I don't think he might get put under the same type of intense pressure that sort of Conte and Jose do, because there are a lot of people who love Conte and Jose, but there are a lot of people that are sort of waiting for them to mess up, so that they could jump on them. And I felt like with Ange, maybe that's not as much the case, but I am a little worried that what you brought up with Fulham, Dave, could happen again, where let's say a Dyer or a Phillips has to come into the team, and they're bound to make mistakes, and they're bound to make the team, maybe look bad, or, make the performance look a bit questionable. And where will the blame be? Where will the blame lie, and where will the pressure lie? Will it be on Ange's doorstep, or will it be on somebody else's?
Here's the thing, though, right? And I think injuries is the biggest problem, or the biggest thing we need to sort of hone down on and focus on, because look, everyone goes on about Jose and Conte that they're not modern day managers, they're not man managers. Then how did Jose have the squad he had at the top of the league? How did Conte, with the squad he have, get them into Champions League football? So they have to be good managers and good man managers. But the difference is where it all went wrong, is injuries. Under Jose Mourinho, I remember he ended up losing Sergio Reguilon to an injury. We went on like a 4 or 5 game where we couldn't win, and teams targeted Ben Davies, got in behind us and scored goals. Antonio Conte last season got off to the best start ever in the Premier League. But then all of a sudden, injuries started happening. We lose Romero. It started going bad. You take Bentancur out, it went absolutely awry. So, the very same thing could happen under Postecoglou. For instance, you take Adoji out, put in Ben Davies. There's the weakness in your backline. Teams will exploit that, and they will get joy off it. You lose a Mickey van der Ven. Look, I'm not so worried about that, to be honest with you, because I've been campaigning for years. If the likes of some of these other guys that have been here for a long time ain't good enough, bring the youth up. People say it's a gamble, But how much of a gamble really is it when you already know the guys are going to cost you games and make mistakes anyway? It's not really. It's a gamble that I'd rather take. So this has been the problem with Tottenham. For instance, right, the year we got to the Champions League final, yes, we were able to sustain the Champions League run, and thank God for Sonny on that run. But our league form tailed off. People go on like, oh, we got away with the Kane injury. Well, we didn't in the league. And if we're going to sustain this, and you're going to sustain this over multiple competitions, you need a good, strong squad. So my point is that if you have a couple of injuries, the football we're seeing right now could very easily turn very quickly to what we've seen against Fulham on Tuesday night, when you're using less players that aren't as good as the players inside the first 11 or nowhere near that caliber. And it could very easily go like that if we suffer some injuries. And that's something we need to focus on.
Just also, though, kind of on that answer that he brought up, Sonny, though, how he sort of spoke about kind of sustainability of sort of wins, right? He wants to avoid this sort of win now mentality. You know, we have to win something as soon as possible for the sake of winning something. Do you feel like we as maybe a club were guilty of that when we brought in Conte and Mourinho? And maybe you as a fan, were you also maybe guilty of that? I would say I definitely was. I was happy to have Conte and Mourinho in because I did feel like they were the closest thing to a trophy. It felt like sort of fast forwarding, you know, to get one, and, you know, just for the sake of getting one. And maybe I was a bit guilty of that. Is that what Ange is sort of talking about as well?
I even look back like now on those appointments and decisions, and I totally understand them. I feel like, you know, we had a squad which, you know, Kane, Son, you know, people at the peak of their powers, and you've picked two of the best managers at winning stuff, one short term and two like knockout competition. But the problem is, like, if, you know, obviously Jose's a bit on his own plinth because he was literally sacked the week of the final. But I feel like that decision in itself is like, you know, there's a lot of things, you know, about like clauses, and I feel like Levy just didn't want him to Levy was happy to sacrifice that trophy to not have a "I told you so," because Mourinho was going to get sacked in the end, wasn't he? It was inevitable. But if he'd won the trophy, he would have been like, well, I did what you wanted. So what's up with that? You know, Conte got us top 4, but then I'd say his decision making against Sheffield United, like, you've got to question that. Like, you know, not playing Harry Kane in a game where I feel like it was, you know, quite easy to get to that FA Cup final and actually, you know, try and win it that year. But, you know, it's hard to say. You know, when you look back on Tottenham and all that sort of, like, I just find it a bit. It's really hard to sum it all up, and that's why I'm sort of positive now, because I feel like it is a bit of a breath of fresh air. We are seeing, like, you know, and there was moments where, you know, and we were sitting there going like, oh, we'll sacrifice our style, you know, because Tottenham are used to, going down the history, attacking football, you know, some of the best players you've ever seen: Ginola, Sheringham, Bale, Berbatov. You know, the list is endless. We've always been blessed with attackers, Van der Vaart, you know, so many, Defoe. And I'm just sitting there thinking, like, everyone's going, we'll sacrifice that to win. But we weren't getting, you know, we weren't getting it, were we? We were sacrificing, but we were, you know, going 2-0 down in games and having to try and win 3-2. You know, we were, you know, letting Leeds go against Southampton and getting trounced by like Newcastle. I know obviously Conte was gone by then, but it just didn't work. And, you know, maybe that style of football, you know, we were saying about, you know, are these managers, you know, are they suited for modern day football? But it is weird how, like, you know, most managers are playing with goalkeepers and inverted wing backs and all that sort of stuff, and it does seem to work. And like, even like I said to someone the other day, you know, we Conte's system apparently relied on the fullbacks, but I feel like the fullbacks have been better in Ange's system. You know, Udogie and Pedro Porro have really pulled their weight in those positions. I think what's the biggest thing about Tottenham is going to be this season is the defense. You know, everyone was going into this season being like, oh, but, you know, the defense isn't good. But I think like the starting defense is a good quality. It is just the, you know, underneath that, if we do like lose an injury. Going back to what we were saying like, about injuries, maybe it's good we haven't got European football, because maybe, you know, if we were playing even like Thursday, Sunday, I think this squad would get ravaged. So maybe like playing once a week might actually help us in the long term. And that's what happens. We build a squad ready for next season that can then play if we get to that position Thursday, Sunday, whatever, like whatever.
See,
Wednesday.
that's what we have to do, Sonny, because we can't keep going on with this nonsense that we'll sacrifice this competition for this competition. You have to expect, as a Big Six club, you're going to be in all competitions on all fronts every single season. So therefore, and also that's the remit by Daniel Levy, right? He sacked managers on the basis of not getting top four. So that's also the remit set by Daniel Levy. Okay, so then you have to provide a squad for us to do that. We shouldn't need Harry Kane, Sheffield United in a cup game. We should have more than enough strength in depth as a Big Six side to roll out there with some players on the periphery of the first team, mixed with a couple of the under-21 guys, and go out and win games. When I was growing up watching Tottenham, we were able to do that. How do we think we blooded Harry Kane? Yes, he got a lot of low moves, but when he was around and he got his opportunity in the UEFA Cup, he took it. And this is where we have to get back to. We can't keep relying on having to put our best 11 out there in midweek games, because what people also don't talk about in football, they have red zones, with players and that, and they won't put them in danger. So if that's what the science is telling them, that's why you're not seeing him in them games. And that's when the managers then rely on their squad. The squad ain't good enough, the squad players, that's why they're not in the first 11. But because it's such a drop-off in quality to what we have in the first 11, results start turning. Then when injuries happen, they're in your first 11. Performances start dipping. Results start turning. And it ends up getting your manager sacked. And this is the biggest problem at Tottenham. We now need to kick on from here, get this season over and done with. I think you're right, Sonny. This season is a blessing in disguise without Europe, although I'm not happy about it. And I'm not happy that we're playing in all white either. That should be said for Europe only. But this season maybe is a blessing in disguise that if we can get through sort of relatively okay, and then next summer add to that and fill out the squad, because we still have to do more next summer, right? The homegrown quota ain't anywhere near good enough. When you look at a lot of the players that meet that homegrown quota, they still have to go. But it's important that we eventually build that squad at Tottenham Hotspur, because a lot of the times I've heard excuses for a lot of them old guys, the likes of Sanchez and Dyer. They're squad players. We keep them around. They're just squad players. We don't need to waste money there. Okay, but when them squad players come in, you wonder, and you're the very first people to moan that we get knocked out of the cup competitions. But you said he's a squad player. These are squad player games. So for me, we need to fill out that squad and create a squad after this season. If not, expect the same crap to continue.
That's what I'm thinking. That's why I think it was, at first I questioned dropping Lloris and bringing in Vicario. But then that's maybe you have to do that. Like we've seen that with Arsenal. I hate using them as an example, but it seems to be like, they got rid of Mustafi, they got rid of Socrates, they got rid of that group who were like, you got to yeah, exactly. You get rid of those egos, get rid of those. And I'm not saying that Lloris has an ego, but when you've been at a club for 10 years and you're the captain and that, don't get me wrong. I actually, it's a bit sad how it is sort of come to an end. But then it is sort of his decision making. Like he is turning down clubs because he thinks he's good enough to be a starter. Like he turned down Newcastle, he turned down Lazio and all that. So, it is a bit of, it takes two to tango in this situation. But that's what we're still going through this process. Like same with Arsenal. It took them 2 to 3 years to get rid. They literally let go of Nicolas Pepe this summer to for free. And
that's a good example.
And we're still in a situation where this is a massive problem as well. Is Levy's gone? I've spent 72 million I've spent 70 odd million on Ndombele. I've spent X on this player, and he's not willing to be like, okay, I spent a lot. Let's just get rid. Let's just get rid. He's like, okay, let's loan that player out for his third loan spell. You're like, no, like what are we getting out of that? Sometimes you got to just cut the tie.
When you even say it out loud, it's hilarious. His third loan spell after coming in for 70 million.
Like, just get rid, because it's not like, and everyone this year even was like, oh, maybe this isn't Ndombele's revival.
Yeah,
like maybe he'll come back. And then it was Lo Celso who was the one who came back. And we're still going through that process of shifting that dead wood, and that does take a couple of years to do. Because but I think we're getting there. Like getting rid of the likes of Harry Winks. It's on the cuff. I actually hope we got rid of a lot more.
Is this where the word painful rebuild comes from then? Or these sort of moments where we sort of like like somebody wrote this on Twitter, Zoe, who I follow, and she said like, the fact that we do have this sort of, I don't know, this bad taste in our mouth when it comes to the outgoings. Like we feel like there still wasn't enough done in that department. It all sort of does, point towards why the term is, a painful rebuild, because part of it is because there are going to be these these roadblocks, and there's going to be these obstacles in the way. They're going to make the rebuild not seamless and not going to make it perfect. And in Spurs' case, it's been a lot of the deadwood have not wanted to leave, and or also not even that desired really in the first place. And then we also happen to have an ownership that's not really that great at getting rid of, the people that are sort of the dead assets and the dead weight. And so that's part of what we're going through, I think, as this painful rebuild is, these, different roadblocks that come up, along the way, and they are going to hinder Ange, and they are going to get in his way, coming this season. But kind of connecting back to what we said earlier, sort of to round that off, is, it kind of comes back to why you have to give him the trust then, right? You have to remember, wait a minute, he didn't get all the outgoings he wanted. He didn't get all the center backs he might have needed. He didn't get this player that he could have, used for the squad, etc. So you have to give him that time, that maybe in a few seasons he will have more of that squad that he needs. And it's also probably why he said, I'm not going to get sort of sucked into the win as soon as possible mentality, because I want to build a team and a squad that can sustain winning something every single year for a long time. He wants to put the team in a position to win something every year. And I can get with that, because originally I am a part of sort of the win as soon as possible sort of mentality. But now that I think about it, that then means, you're probably sort of, how would you put it, kind of putting up with a lot of things that maybe you shouldn't be putting up with. You're sort of putting up with certain players sticking in the squad that shouldn't be there. You're putting up with maybe a lack of, sort of a rebuild and sort of regeneration of a team. And I think this is all just, part of the patience with Ange.
I think.
Do we sort of think with like the whole like trophy hoodoo? Don't get me wrong, I'd love to win a trophy. I want Tottenham to win a trophy, but do you think it's come to this extent where, because of how social media is, Twitter and all that, it's like we're paying lip service to like internet trolls to be like, we've won something, you can now stop? Because I can sit here and say, like, it seems to be weird, and like football is so reactionary nowadays, where it's like, Newcastle are riding a crest of a wave. They're finishing the top 4 for the first time in 20 years. They haven't won a trophy since 1955, and they're somehow a bigger club than us now. And I'm like, but no, it's not. It's not the case at all. Like, Tottenham is still a big club historically. We have won a lot of, FA Cups, League Cups, like 2 European trophies, which Arsenal can't say.
Some of the best players ever have come through.
Exactly.
That's
what annoys me. I feel like we're trying to, prove a point and be like, like trying to win that trophy and go, we've done that. We've done that. And, that doesn't work out like that. We sometimes, the teams that have worked out have been the ones who have spent a bit of money and given people time. And it didn't work overnight for some. It doesn't work overnight for some of these teams. Like, they need that sort of process, because they might not be able to compete with the likes of Man City or whoever who can just chuck a. Look at Manchester United. Like, Manchester United have now gone how many years without winning a Premier League? They've spent billions of pounds, and they're no closer to finding their end goal. And it's like with them, like they're going to give Eric Ten Hag time, and that's probably worth it. Because I still I think the big question throughout all this is, what is next? Who do you bring in? What do you do afterwards if it all goes wrong? It's really hard to tell now.
We tried the win now mentality, though, right? And like we just didn't work out for us.
Exactly.
And so we can't really do it again or really go back to it. We just sort of have to accept that we went for this ASAP win as soon as possible sort of thing. And it just, for various reasons, did not work out. And it's sort of have to just accept that we might have to wait a little bit longer. Once again, we do have to sort of suck it up and just, go through this process with Ange. We tried to do the shortcut with Jose and Conte, but it didn't work out, and we're going to have to sort of do what everybody else has done and do sort of the long path. Yeah, dude.
I think on that though, Jack, I think that's what sort of probably irks people is, yes, we tried to win now sort of by hiring Jose Mourinho, right? But if you think you're just hiring Jose Mourinho and tell him to work with Eric Dyer is going to win you a trophy, it ain't going to happen. We've seen that. But if you bring in Jose Mourinho, you also have to bring in signings with him for that to work. You have to go out and try and lure some of the best players in the world to your club. But Tottenham don't operate like that. So yes, they've gone down that route with the appointment, but they're not following it through with all the other behind the scenes stuff that it needs. And this is the problem. Like with Tottenham, I think, look, I can accept when I've grown up, Tottenham were always a club that brought young, scouted well, and developed their players, right? It's always been like that when I was growing up. And I can accept that. I'm not one sitting here that I'm demanding world-class players in every single position. I understand. We're not owned by a whole country like Newcastle, Man City, people like that, right? I fully get it. But we make lives hard on ourselves. We were a club that picked up a couple of trophies every single decade. And since Daniel Levy's come in, he's got one over 23 years. And that sort of speaks for itself. And we're getting further and further and further away. Then we got back there under Pochettino. But due to other moves made that, it held us back. For instance, right, we got to a Champions League final. So we're all sitting there going, okay, we're at that level. But the squad that got to Champions League final, a lot of it needed rebuilding. That's why Pochettino spoke about the painful rebuild, because a lot of the players were coming to an end. Hence, when Jose came in, he no longer had Wanyama, no longer had Toby and Yam, because they were coming to an end. Ericsson was also getting fed up and wanted out. So a lot of that was coming to an end. But then you bring in Jose Mourinho, but then you bring him in Ryan Sessegnon, Matt Doherty, Joe Rodon, people like that, and you expect them to go and win a league. So it's sort of like we do things half-assed. If we actually done something fully behind it and done it properly with the right infrastructure behind the scenes, we could go on and win trophies with the right managerial appointment, with the right recruitment. But because there's always things that hold it back, for instance, right, under Pochettino, we moved to the new stadium. Great, I get it. Brilliant. We got a new stadium, but then we go on to sell Harry Kane, even though we're told when we build a new stadium, we won't be selling our best players. You got the training complex. But what we didn't have on that Champions League run is we didn't have all the people that Paratici has since put in place, the scouting department, everything else that ultimately can bridge that gap, that can help you sustain stuff. Because, okay, if you don't have the money, you've got players coming through your academy, which we weren't producing either. So, we didn't have the academy system. We didn't have the scouting department and everything else when we reached the Champions League final. So we weren't able to maintain it. But from the shell, from the outside, you've got great players. You've got Pochettino, you've got a stadium, and you've got a training complex. And again, it goes back to things being done half-assed. Because if we could scout the likes of Luka Modric, lure him in here, even though the whole of Europe were after him, Kyle Walker from Sheffield United's academy, Aaron Lennon, Danny Rose, people like that from Leeds Academy that we scouted over the years. Gareth Bell's another one, Southampton Academy that we brought in here. All of a sudden, how does that stop then when you're going into a Champions League final with Pochettino? How comes that still isn't being maintained? How comes your scouting department is gone? And this is the problem. It's always something that's holding this club back. They can never get everything all in a line in one and push forward. There's always something pulling against.
They got to create a problem.
That's what ultimately annoys the Tottenham fans.
But do you think we've come full circle though? Because when you mentioned about the signings under Jose and Conte, to me, I can't remember how long Jose's deal was, but Conte's was a 2-year deal, and he was going, "I need X, Y, and Z," and we were going, "But you're not even committing to your future. So why should we spend?
Then why
100
bring him
million
in here in the first place?"
And then that's the question, is it? Whereas I feel like now with even people saying to me, they're like, "Oh, Ange is only going to sign a short 2-year deal." He signed a longer deal than Pochettino at Chelsea, and they're all about Project FC. He signed a 4-year deal, Postecoglou. So maybe, and now the way I say with these stat-based signings, maybe we've literally gone
back
circle.
to our old
We've gone back to our old ways of like, maybe we need to scout, maybe we need to pick up these players, because, even like the last 2 transfer windows, we went through Basuma, and you're like, oh, this guy didn't play. Jed Spence is a club signing. And it's like, maybe these were the players where Levy might have been playing some 4D chess game where he's gone, these are the players for the next guy. These aren't actually, and the players in between have been these, like, because if you look at like some of the signings we've made, and like Paratici's got actually a lot of praise over the last week or so.
Yeah, we
because
love
a lot of these signings are like young, got a lot of potential, instead of just like, these players who are plucked out of like nowhere, or these has-beens, or like players where they're not going to come good. Whereas I feel like we are signing a lot of players where I don't think there's a risk, but with Brennan Johnson, there's a ceiling. Like he could hit us, like he could go. Yeah, exactly. So that's what I think. Maybe we've gone full circle, and the likes of we didn't actually want to. It was sort of like Levy did go to Jose and Conte. This is for now. Like, I'm only going to give you this sort of transfer budget. You've got to try and win us something now. And then it was like God, it hasn't worked. Let's go back to what we know. But like, try. But is it because I suggested to you guys? Would you say like Levy sets out saying top 4 in a trophy? Like, is that the like or try and get a trophy? Like, try to win the FA Cup. Like, attempts to go far in it. It's like when you start a FIFA career mode and they go like, you get your what's it called? Your thingies that pop up and you're like, yeah, your objectives. And it's like, I feel like that's what he says to a manager. And I would comfortably say that he said to Ange this year, top 6. Like, because even if you get 5th this year, we might get Champions League. Top 6 and make us bring the club back to what we want. And you know, because we were given
less
money,
tangible,
like,
sort of like
like even like Maddison. Like Maddison is like a statement signing and a shrewd deal, if anything. Like, and like even like he's come out and said this week, like he didn't join because of Kane. He joined because of and a lot of what these players are saying. I had a chat with Ange and he said this, and it's like that's what you want to hear. Whereas people say, has he got Paul? Like, but he obviously is selling them the dream or something. Like, apparently,
once he says mate, it's over. They're a Spurs player.
Yeah, and
once
he's
he
like,
calls them mate.
But I mean, honestly, it's just but the more you like assess the last couple of years, it's just confusing, and you wonder what we're, my heart rate and going through the roof most of the week. But
I think you definitely have an interesting video though to think about though for the future with like how Spurs kind of going full circle, or they kind of going back to what they once knew, what they used to be good at, what they sort of used to do well, right? And might be the case here. Sonny, thanks for coming on, and I look forward to maybe having more discussions with you sometime in the future. It'd be nice to have you on a panel show of some kind if you're ever available. Definitely. I really enjoyed this, and tell the Harris Army, our Flat Cap Army, about your own channel, Sonny Talk Spurs, please.
I'm actually gutted I didn't wear a flat cap. Honestly, my dad's a big fan of one as well. I could have borrowed one of his, but honestly, they are just good, aren't they? I'm so happy they have come back in style. But yeah, obviously, Sonny Talk Spurs is the YouTube channel. Sonny Snelling on all of my socials. You can usually see me on TalkSport as well. But yeah, Sonny Talk Spurs, obviously, quite new channel. Getting close to the 1,000. I need to get to the 1,000 because it's just the first benchmark, and you can put that to one side and then continue the grind, because we all know it's a grind and a half, honestly.
Definitely. Well, thanks for coming on, and as well, everybody, the link will be in the comments, be in the description, as well as in the title, so you should not be missing it. No excuses. Let's get them on over to 1,000. Welcome on over to the Spurs YouTube community. And also, too, we do have a bonus section that in case, if you're not a member, we are going to be asking him who his sort of favorite Spurs player is currently in this team, as well as who he thinks the best player of this season will be. A bit of a prediction as well, to get a bit more, or to know a bit more about him. So if you want to catch that, feel free to grab a membership and you'll be able to see that video. Dave, any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
No, I just want to say a massive thank you to you, Sonny. I really enjoyed that. A really good conversation. And I would urge people, get over to Sonny's channel. Make sure you show him that love. Smash that subscribe button. He's started to put out content there recently, and he's growing very, very fast. So you want to be a part of that journey. So please get over there and show him the love, because I know you guys would have enjoyed his contribution today. So thank you very much, Sonny.
Before the head loss comes in as well, because we know that's coming at some point this season, where it's got me like screaming on a thumbnail.